County, but I also take care of the city of Santa Barbara. So that is why I'm up here today, and to help kind of give the 10 warning signs for Alzheimer's or other dementias. And that's what we'll talk about today. If you have any questions while I'm talking, please raise your hand. I'm more than happy to kind of deviate from where the subject would be. If you have questions that you've been wondering about or something that I've brought up that you're not clear about, please just let us, raise your hand, and then we'll go and we will listen to what you have to say. So let's start. You all have pamphlets that have the 10 warning signs. Why don't you guys open them up? So just to give a little start, So why is it important to understand about,
we need a couple more.
Why is it important to understand what the 10 warning signs are? Why do you think that might mean something now?
For me, it's being prepared.
Very good.
Okay, and understanding what's happening, how to deal with it as it progresses.
Very important. And part of what's happening now is that we know with Alzheimer's, and we'll take that as because about 80% of people who have dementia will have Alzheimer's. So there are other dementias, but now we do have a new medication that is helping to slow the progression. But it has to be in the very early stages. So it's either MCI, which is mild cognitive impairment, or in the very early stages of Alzheimer's, and it has to be diagnosed as Alzheimer's. Otherwise, they can't give the medication because the medication is only for Alzheimer's. So that's why it's important to know and understand what the warning signs are, because so many times people, when they're diagnosed, are not in the early stages. They're more likely in the beginning of the middle to the middle stages of it. And by that time, it's too late for the medication. We're seeing more advanced symptoms, and then we're trying to struggle to figure out what are the next steps. With Alzheimer's is making inroads in the brain up to 20 years before the first symptom shows. So, for instance, I'm 60, almost 64, and therefore, if I'm gonna get it in my 80s, it's already starting to make those inroads. So understanding it and getting ready for it is really important, because with dementia, it is the most expensive illness right now, and it is costing the United States up to about $340 billion. And by the year 2050, it will cost $1 trillion. So trying to get a handle on what we need to know can help families prepare. Because in the course of their illness, it can cost, at least a few years ago, the number I heard was $350,000. But with early detection and with making a plan, you can save up to $65,000 in that course, because you're preparing and you're getting ready. Because when it's all said and done, Alzheimer's, including all the other dementias, they're terminal illnesses. So looking at it in that perspective can help you to prepare for what is coming and to know that it is a progressive illness. Any questions so far? Okay. It absolutely. But with education and with knowledge is power. And the more you know and the more you understand, the more you're going to be ready for what you have to deal with. If you're a family member or if you yourself end up having the illness, then you have time to get ready. You have time to get your paperwork in ready, because we know that 75% of Americans don't have their medical power of attorney. How many of you guys have your medical power of attorney all set? Very good. Yeah, me too now. So extremely important, especially when it comes to dementia, because once the dementia really takes a foothold, then there's, it's gonna be an advocate for your family to know, and why not help your family with letting them know what you want. Now my mom, this is how I got into this, was that my mom got younger onset, or she had a couple of different ones. She had mixed dementia, which means that you have more than one. So she had Alzheimer's, she had vascular dementia, and she had frontal temporal lobe dementia. She started showing signs in her early 60s, and she passed away at 78. So understanding that and getting ready was what I tried to do, because I knew that there was no cure, at least back then. My mom died in 2008. So back then, I call it the dark ages. There wasn't a lot of information, there wasn't a lot of tests that could be done to really begin to find out what type of dementia somebody has. So part of the 10 warning signs is really understanding what are the differences between having dementia and having, it's just stress, old age, menopause. Because let's face it, women go through memory issues, and it is menopause, memory issues. But because of where we fall in the age line, it can get a little nerve-wracking. So understanding what those differences are can help you. How many have gone into a room looking for your keys? We've all done that. Or we go up into a parking garage looking for our car, and we get up there and it's like, okay, where's my car? Right? That's all normal. That's it. The difference is that someone with dementia won't even know they misplaced their keys. They'll come into a room, they'll put them down, they'll say, oh, I forgot. And they'll go into another room and they'll pick it up, their purse, their phone, whatever. And then they won't even remember that they've left their keys in another room. That's the difference. We know the difference. We'll say, oh my gosh, I left my keys. We'll retrace our steps. We can do that. Somebody with dementia is not going to be able to do that. There's the difference. Did you have a?
No.
Okay.
Sorry, I have a broken hand here.
Oh, poor thing.
Swell.
Absolutely. So the other thing is let's talk about the word dementia, which can get confusing for people because that's used a lot in conjunction with Alzheimer's. And we use the term, the umbrella term, but I use another term. I use another analogy. So if someone said to you, you have cancer, the first question would be, what kind do I have? Same thing. If the doctor says, oh yeah, you've got dementia. Well, doc, what kind do I have? Is it Alzheimer's? Is it vascular dementia? Is it frontal temporal lobe? That's the difference. So when the doctor says it's dementia and don't worry about it, that's not good enough. You have to press the doctor for more information and to be more specific. Because there are tests now that can help you. MRIs, PET scans, CAT scans can all help to determine what type of dementia you might have or your loved one might have. And that's important because different dementias have different life expectancies. So Alzheimer's is the longest one. It's anywhere on average about 8 to 15 years. Vascular dementia, 5 years, right, Luciana? Give or take. Lewy body, about that same amount. Frontal temporal lobe, 6 to 8 years. So there is a difference, and that means that the behaviors and the things that could be changing are going to change a little sooner than you might think. Because again, when someone is diagnosed, they're not in the first stage. They're not in the second stage. They're usually in the third or fourth stage, and there's only 7 stages. So understanding what you're up against can help you to make good decisions, to help your loved one and to be able to help yourself. Any questions yet? Okay. Okay. So when you're looking through the 10, are there any ones that kind of stick out? One of the things that we talk about is how it affects our daily life. If it is starting to affect your daily life, then there's something not right? You need to get it checked. And here's something to help you is that when you go in to get a physical, the doctor, your regular GP, is supposed to be starting to do memory tests. And it's supposed to be every year that you have your physical, they're checking your memory too. It's now part of the overall picture. So if that's happening, and if it's not, you need to let your doctor know that you want to start having that happen, because then you get a baseline. I noticed that with my doctor about 10 years ago. He was starting to ask me questions. And it was different than what my normal, it's like, what is he doing? And then I realized, oh my God, he's checking my memory. And I was in my early 50s. And it's like, okay, I'm okay with that. Let's get a baseline. So that if something does change or whatever, we know what's going on. We know when those changes happen. Because the other thing is too, not all the time when there's memory issues isn't necessarily dementia. You know, it could be a vitamin B12 deficiency. It could be, you know, a tumor that's doable, that can be fixed. But if you don't get it checked out, you're not gonna know. So understanding that and having the doctor having a baseline is gonna help with your care and your loved one's care. Decrease in poor judgment. That's a biggie. Because we are so used to our partners or our loved ones being able to make the judgments and to be able to figure things out. But as dementia progresses, that starts to get a lot tougher. You know, they'll put, you know, tin foil in the microwave, or they'll forget to turn the stove off. Those are all things that we start to notice as things progress. So another thing to look out for is just subtle behavior changes, and also understanding what you're up against, because Alzheimer's tends to be more of short-term memory in the beginning, and that tends to be a while before the behavior starts to come into play. But Lewy body dementia, that's more problematic. Frontal temporal lobe, there's more language issues. They may still have their short-term memory, but suddenly they're having trouble talking and being able to express. That's important. That's why understanding the differences is important. Also, about 50% of people with dementia have mixed dementia, like my mother did. Most of the time it's Alzheimer's and maybe vascular dementia, or maybe frontal temporal lobe. It's rare to have 3, but then my mother was an unusual lady, so it didn't surprise me that she had 3. So it's a matter of really getting that and to understand how it works so that you can be able to care for them. Because in those early stages, things like sound sensitivity, light sensitivity, your depth perception gets off. Those are all important things to look for, especially the depth perception. Because if they get up in the middle of the night and they try to find the bathroom, they may not see it. Because if you have a white toilet with a white wall, they may not see the toilet because white on white would fuse in together. So changing either the wall if you can or putting a colorful toilet seat on the toilet is really a good thing, because then they'll be able to see and know what bathroom that is. Because at night they can get confused too. So it's a matter of what I call dementia-proofing the house. We all did it when we had children and we had to baby-proof our house. With someone with dementia, we have to start dementia-proofing and making it so that they are able to function within their house. If that's where they want to stay and that's where the family decides for them to stay, at least in the beginning stages, you still have to make some accommodations. Any questions? Okay. So understanding how that all happens is why it's important to know where the 10 warning signs are. And the other things is when they start to more or less start withdrawing from social events, withdrawing from work. Why do you think that could be? Partly that, yes. What else?
Loss of interest.
Good. What else? also not remembering faces, not remembering names.
Here we are.
My husband realizes sometimes, he'll say, what's happening to my brain? Because he can't remember this or that. He's also OCD, so that's the other issue.
Yeah, that's a double whammy.
So he has certain things that he has to do methodically.
And that's true of a lot of dementia patients, is that their world starts to have to get much more controlled. You know, it's lunch, it's breakfast at 7, lunch at noon, dinner's at 5, and they don't like deviating from their schedule because that's what helps to make them feel a little bit more secure. They, in the beginning, they know something's wrong. My mom used to say the same thing. She'd tap my head. I can't remember things. You know, my short-term memory is going. And it's like we never told her how bad it was. We kind of had to, and she knew. You know, I don't think we had to pretend. I think she already knew, and therefore we didn't really have to go through that.
Is there a special kind of doctor that can deal with this?
Neurologists would be the one to make that diagnosis because they can do the memory tests. And really it's a collaborative. So it is talking, it's doing the MOCA test, it's doing the 3 words, remember these 3 words, and I'm gonna ask you them, later on. But now you can do PET scans, you can do MRIs, and they can help with everything else to make that diagnosis as to what type of dementia you have. When my mom was doing it, because she died in 2008, they didn't have all of that. But because technology has gotten so good, now we can know. Back in the day, it was an autopsy, to be able to tell what type of dementia a person had. So understanding that can make a big difference. And yes, neurologists, but here's the thing too that you need to be aware of. If you're going to go to a neurologist, minimum wait is usually 6 months. So if you suspect something, try to find a neurologist, make that appointment, because 6 months is a long time. Especially with some of them, like with Lewy body, where there's behavioral issues, aggression, things like that, you're gonna wanna get as much help as you can in the early stages, and to have a plan. When I meet with families, and I do meet with families, and I talk to them about having a strategic plan. And I say, okay, let's look at where you are right now. Let's look at where you're gonna be 6 months from now, and where are you gonna be a year from now. And have an idea of where you're going to be and what you want your plan to be. Because if something happens in the interim, if you already have that plan, you can take what's gonna be happening in 6 months and you can bring it up to right now. You're not gonna be scrambling. If the doctor is saying, this is what you have now isn't working, figure something out to help you, bring somebody in, placement, whatever. But if you've got that plan, you already have an idea of what you're doing. That makes a big difference, and it cuts down on your stress as the caregiver. Because don't kid yourself that there isn't stress when you're doing this, because guess what? You suddenly are not just doing what you had always been doing, but now you're a caregiver. And as time moves on, it becomes 24/7. So understanding what you're doing and where your threshold is, because people ask me all the time, it's like, how do we know when to place? How do we know when we bring people in? And I said, it is never with the person with dementia. It is always with the main caregiver, and when they've hit their wall. That's when changes happen. And they have to, because you have to put yourself into that equation of being able to take care of yourself as well as your loved one. And the analogy that I use a lot is when you're flying on a plane and you have the flight attendant is telling you about the safety measures that they do, and they say, well, when the oxygen masks drop in front, who do you put on first? Yourself. You'd be surprised at how many times I have people say, oh, my loved one. It's like, no, if you're unconscious, how do you help your loved one?
Yeah.
So you need to put it on yourself. So therefore, when you're starting to make that strategic plan, you have to include yourself in that equation. Because if you're not there or you have issues too, what happens? And frankly, you need to have a plan A, which is maybe you being the caregiver all along because you've taken care of yourself, you've got the plan, you know what you're doing. But then what if something happens to you? Who's gonna be that person taking care of your loved one? Are there kids? Are there relatives to help? Is there somebody else that can do it? Or you have a plan of placement, and once that's in there, the financials can be taken care of, and then they'll be taken care of. It's a matter of really thinking things through and doing it in the early stages, because you don't want to get to the hospital and the doctor saying, hey, I'm not releasing them until you have a plan. Because that actually happened to us. Not with my mother, but with my grandmother. Because she was living alone, she had health issues, she ended up in the hospital between Christmas and New Year's, and the doctor says, does your mother, talking to my mom, does your mother live alone? Yep. Not anymore, she doesn't. Figure out where she's going. This was Christmas time. But because we had done some legwork, we were able to find, we called the place that we were gonna put her in 2 years prior, and we were able to get her in there. But how much easier was that? Because we already had done the groundwork and been able to make that plan, and we were able to get her in there. She wasn't happy that she wasn't in independent living. It doesn't matter. You know, she had 2 good years. And that's what we want, is to keep them safe and out of harm's way. Because as the disease progresses, more and more things start to happen. So understanding that and being prepared for that is gonna help you. Okay, I'll just keep going. One of the things to look out for with people with dementia is the fact that they do start having little things, like they're more susceptible to urinary tract infections. And because of that, well, let me back up. They're also not able to verbalize as well. So they're not necessarily able to tell you when there's something going on. It's what I call becoming the medical detective. You have to look at your loved one to see if something has changed. People with dementia, if they get a urinary tract infection, they could be totally normal 1 minute and climbing the walls the next. And you're going, wait a minute, what is going on here? And then we go get them checked. They have a urinary tract infection, we get them on antibiotics, and all of a sudden they come right back down and they're okay. But they're not able to verbalize as much. And as the disease progresses, any of them really, you're gonna have the same issues. So getting an understanding of that and really having to make sure that they're drinking plenty of water and eating and stuff, and making sure that they're understanding, because as time moves on, they're gonna understand less and less. And what happens is that they may not understand what you're saying, but boy, do they understand the tone of voice. So if you start to get irritated, if you start to get frustrated, they're gonna pick up on that. And they're not gonna understand why that's happening. And then they're gonna get upset. And before you know it, all of a sudden you're escalating into an argument and you don't even know how you got there. So what you have to do is really think of a way to handle the repeating questions. You know, when they're asking the same questions over and over again. And then how can you do it? Now, the way I did it with my mother is I have a theater background. So and since this is my fantasy, I was an actor on Broadway. And I had to do 8 performances a week. And as an actor, every performance had to be the best that I got, and it had to be so that the audience never knew that this may be my 10th performance or my 200th performance. It had to be one, because I have a brand new audience. Same thing with my mom. So that when she would ask me a question and I would start to go in, I'd say, okay, Monday night, first performance. Then my mom would cut me off halfway through my spiel and say, so what have you been up to? Day 2, take a deep breath, second performance, have to go for it. And I just kept going, so that way my mom would never know that I was getting irritated with her asking me the same question and realizing that she was not getting anything I was saying. So it helped to keep my level of my own anxiety about it down, because of course we're watching someone, who's really struggling and trying to do the best they can, but has no control over what's happening to their brain. And one of the things that I have found fascinating with doing this work, because I've now been with the Alzheimer's Association for about 6.5 years. I was a volunteer for 8 years prior to that as a facilitator at Heritage House. I did that. And so I've been around this a long time, and it is amazing how you learn a lot about how things work, right? Patience being one of them, and staying in the moment. Because really people with dementia, they only have right now, because they don't have the memories. That's slowly being eroded. And ones where it's hard for families to kind of get, because if you look at it, most of us who know or love somebody with dementia, it's a family member. It's a spouse, it's a parent, or even a sibling, because I have patients that have dementia in their 40s and 50s. So it can happen pretty much along those lines, but when you're going along, all families have shared history. We have shared pasts. We have shared futures, because we're making plans for the holidays. We're doing things in the summer. We're doing all sorts of stuff. But when someone gets dementia, they stop moving forward and they start moving backwards. So first it's the short-term memory things that start to happen, and that could be very subtle. You don't notice it, you're just taking it, it's either old age or stress. But then all of a sudden the next step is it time for me to take the kids to school? Am I doing the carpool? And it's like, kids in school? I haven't been in school in like 30 years. And then you realize, oh my God, my loved one is back at when we were kids. And that means that anything that came after that is now gone. So no more frame of reference there. So that can be for a couple of years going along those lines and everything, and we go in. And the next thing is, have you seen my mom? I haven't seen her, is she okay? Where are my siblings? And then you realize, oh my God, they're back in their childhood. I remember one time seeing my dad and asking him how it was going, and he goes, if I have to hear one more thing about your Uncle Jack and your Uncle Mike, I think I'm gonna go out the window. Because that's where my mom was back in her childhood, and my mom had a rough childhood, so it wasn't always good memories. So we really were very grateful when all of a sudden those memories are gone too. But that being said, that means everything after that is gone too. So there's no more frame of reference. So it's a matter of staying in the moment and helping them get through those moments. And that's keeping sometimes occupied. In those beginning stages, it is keeping them occupied. Sometimes it's doing adult daycare. My dad, needed some time and found a place for my mom. And my mom rediscovered her love of painting. And man, she would go to the adult daycare and she'd do painting for the day or whatever. And that helped to give my dad a break. And he was able, because he was still kind of working. So because my parents were still in their 60s, they were still kind of doing stuff. But my mom couldn't do it anymore. And my parents worked from home, so my dad needed that space. And so my mom had to go to the daycare. And there were days when my mother did not want to go. And my dad said, too bad, that's it. And I always use the analogy when I'm talking to families is like, would you leave a 6-year-old alone in a house? That's a good analogy, because you wouldn't. So you have to look at your loved one and say, could I leave them alone in the house? Most of the time, that's gonna be no, especially as their judgment becomes more and more impaired. And what's hard for families is the expectations they have that these loved ones can still function and function like they have been functioning, when really they can't. And those expectations add stress to their loved one. And so you have to kind of pull it out. And then what you have to do is try not to remember how they were a couple of years ago, 10 years ago. but how are they right now today? Because here's the thing, they might need more help, but because we've been living in the past and having those expectations, we're not getting them help that they need. And that could be maybe having somebody come in to help with the changing because they become incontinent. You know, there's things that will change as time moves on, and getting ready for that is really important. Any questions? Okay. So,
What I found, well, my doctor is the one that told me, he says, you need time for yourself, so I take one afternoon a week.
good.
When I go play bridge. And I used to worry a lot about, my partner. But then I got an air tag.
Mhm.
He wears it on his keychain, and so I can monitor where he is. And most of the time he stays close to home, which is good, but I have those 3.5 hours, which is a great relief.
Because it gives you that break, and you need that break.
And the other thing I've learned to tell him, I said, I need some time for myself. So just give me 10 minutes, and then I'll be okay, ready to face whatever.
Good.
So far, that works. That was the other thing that my doctor recommended.
That's good. Because they do understand. I mean, you don't necessarily have to say why you need that, you know, because you've been asking me the same question 100 times. I mean, I remember one time calling my dad, and he was really upset because he and my mom had just had this huge fight. And she stormed out, came back 20 minutes later, saw that my dad was still upset, but of course had completely forgotten about the argument. Had no idea why, and was upset that my dad was upset. And go, honey, what's wrong? You seem upset. And my dad started the fight all over again. And it's like, okay, Dad, why? You know? But he was only human. You know, you're living with someone 24/7 where things are happening and you're trying to make those adjustments. And you just never know what you're gonna come up against. And so getting ready and understanding about it, yes, it might be depressing, because I have people say that to me about support groups, you know, because I'm a big proponent of support groups. That's what saved me when I was going through it, because in the beginning, my family didn't want to believe it. You know, they didn't believe that my mom was having memory issues and stuff like that. So it was this constant battle of saying, we need to get her checked. We need to find out about this. But they didn't want to do that. So I finally went to a support group up here, and remember sitting in the meeting going, yeah, my mom's doing that. Yeah, my mom's doing that. And felt this relief of knowing, it's like, okay, I'm not the one going crazy. There is something wrong, and I just have to wait, you know, because sometimes that happens. Sometimes with family dynamics, you gotta wait, you know, until something happens, something changes, you know, it comes up, because it's really important to get prepared that way. And one of the hardest things about that is driving, giving up the car. That's a huge thing. That's like one of the #1 things that we talk about in support groups, because in America, cars mean independence, man. You know, and we're not giving that up. But when someone has dementia, oh my God, they should not be driving, and the doctors are supposed to be reporting it to the DMV. And the DMV then in turn reports it to the insurance company. And then, from what I've been hearing, insurance companies don't always notify the insurer that they've canceled the policy. Tell me about it. Could not believe it when I heard that. But the DMV, they're a little better. They'll send a letter. They'll notify the person sometimes, not always. Or they'll say, come in and take the test. We'll see how you are. And if you pass the test, they'll give you the license. But here's something that you need to know. If your loved one gets into an accident, and the person that you are involved with in the car, and the other car, finds out that they have dementia, and the family knew about it, you guys are now liable. And families have been wiped out of their finances because they found out about that. So there's a lot of cases happening in California where that is, and families are, like I said, have been wiped out. So being more the aggressor in trying to curtail your loved one from driving, extremely important. Besides the fact that their judgment is off. We said it, it's in the 10 warning signs. Judgment is off. If it's off, why would you put someone in a car? I mean, my mom came home one day and got confused between the accelerator and the brake and went right into the garage at full speed, hit the washer and dryer and made a perfect square indentation in the cement wall. And I remember when my father called to tell me about it, and I said, okay, that means she's not driving anymore, right, Dad? It's like, oh no, she's never gonna drive again. You know, and that was it. She never drove again. That made it real easy. My mother was never a great driver, so that just kind of helped. Okay. It's just, oh yeah, my mom was a kick. My favorite story about my mom, and pardon my words when I say this because this is my mom's quote, not mine. So in the beginning, I saw her not wearing her wedding ring. And I go, Mom, what happened to your wedding ring? Oh, I don't know, it's somewhere. And I'm thinking, oh, the dementia, it's really coming up. She's lost her wedding ring. So I'd go visit a couple of times, a couple of months goes by. I go down to visit her and I notice she's still not wearing her wedding ring. And I go, Mom, what happened? Do you know what happened to your wedding ring? You're still not wearing it. She goes, yeah, no, I know exactly what happened. My father's in the room this time. And I go, you do? She goes, oh yeah. Your father and I had a fight. I got pissed off and I flushed it down the toilet. Okay, and I turned to my dad and go, is this true? And my dad said, oh yeah, your mom did that. And then my mother says, I paid for it. I could do whatever the hell I want with it. And I'm just looking at her thinking, just when I think it's the dementia, and it has nothing to do with the dementia and everything to do with my mother's personality. So even though someone may have dementia and they may seem to fade away, oh no, you will have some nice surprises. Yes, that you can't assume. You can't assume. Because to me, they're still there. You know, even though they may be seeming to us to be fading away because the damage is being done to the brain, they're still there. Their personality's still there. Sometimes they surprise us, even in the later stages. You know, I remember one time coming up to visit my mom. She was in assisted living at this point, and she didn't see me, and she was talking to one of the nurses who was Hispanic, and my mom learned Spanish as a second language, and she was talking to this nurse in Spanish. Now, my mother had advanced dementia at this point, and I'm looking at her and I'm going, it's amazing how the brain works. You know, that she's still able to pull things up. And then she laughed and I came into her line of view and I walked up and talked to her, and then I took her back to her room. She never talked for the rest of the time I was there. It was like her just doing that totally exhausted her, and she wasn't able to do it. So the brain is amazing and it can do things, but understanding that and kind of learning how to go with the flow becomes really important for the family members. You know, because they're not going to remember stuff, right? So if you get grumpy with them or you do something and you feel bad about it, don't beat yourself up about it. You know, I mean, you're doing the best you can under difficult circumstances and ever-changing circumstances, so that you need to give yourself a break. And here's the thing, your loved ones is not going to remember it. You know, that's gonna be dropped, and they're gonna move on. And they're gonna stay in that moment. They're not gonna be back into the past. They're gonna be right there. So you just have to be gentle with yourself, because this is not an easy. None of these dementias are easy. The other thing that I want to impart, so that if you do have issues and you see family members of it, understand that you are dealing with something that's a terminal illness. Because I hear all the time people are telling me, oh, my loved one, the doctor says they're healthy. Seriously? You're healthy and yet you have Alzheimer's, or you have vascular dementia, All of those are terminal illnesses. But there is a very much of a disconnect with people from the neck down and the neck up. But keep in mind with the brain, you can't change the brain. You can do a lung transplant, you can do a heart transplant, kidney, whatever. You can't change your brain. So as that begins to get more and more diseased, there's gonna be more issues. And getting ready for that and understanding that is what's gonna help you make it through.
I have a question.
Sure.
I have a very good friend of mine who has dementia. She's 74, or just turned 74 a couple of days ago. And she's not taking medication, and she refuses to take the medication. Will that advance it, or is that like 8 to 15 years with medication or without medication?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
I've never even thought about that.
Yeah, because because she took it for 1 month and she was sick the whole month, so she refuses to take it anymore, and I can see her, she's going.
So, depending on what type of dementia she has, that might be why you're seeing more things progressing. Other than that, the new medication that just came out last year, most of the dementia drugs only slow or modify the symptoms. It doesn't stop it. So, some people, and you know, it's I would say 50-50 as to where some families find that the medications help. A lot of them find they don't help. And doctors are keeping them on, like Aricept. When my mother was on it, she couldn't stay on it because she had side effects and she was off. So she was never really on anything for the dementia. She was on medications to help her because the type of dementia she had caused paranoia, caused hallucinations. So we had to do that to give her a quality of life. So those medications she was on, and that helped, that anti-anxiety medications and things like that. She couldn't be on any of the dementia medications. And Aricept in the beginning was only for the very early stages of dementia. It wasn't really meant to be on it, but doctors, I think, are finding that there's some value, so they're keeping their patients on it for 2-3 years. So.
What is this medication?
It's called, okay, no, not Aricept, it's the new one, Lecanemab, which is the newest one. It is done by an infusion. And I guess you have the infusion every couple of weeks. And that is supposed to really help slow the progression of Alzheimer's. But it's just for Alzheimer's, not any of the other dementias. Right now, there's so much testing going on, there's so much research going on. For Alzheimer's has over 400 research projects going on worldwide. Unfortunately, a lot of the other dementias have very little research being done, which is frustrating. Because for me, my mom was suffering more from the frontal temporal lobe and vascular dementia than she really was suffering from Alzheimer's. So it's like, I wanted to see more being done there, and it will. We, at the Alzheimer's Association, we do an international conference every year, and it is amazing how many people from around the world are doing research on all types of dementias. And what's even more amazing is how young the researchers are. I'm sure they're in their late 20s, 30s, and 40s. It is truly amazing that it's going to become their life work. So we are going to get some answers, and we're getting more answers all the time. The newest thing within the last couple of years is how diet and exercising is playing a huge part in helping to keep dementia, off from showing the first signs, and that's making inroads there. It's also helping people who already have dementia to get on that diet and things like that. That's helping there. So there are changes coming and happening. It's been slow. It's been slow.
Yep, there's also some inroads in research on supplement certain vitamins.
Mm-hmm.
You said B12, fish oils, like that actually can help prevent,
Yeah.
and I'm in the medical profession, so I have my eye on, since there's such a genetic component to Alzheimer's, I have my eye on the children of Alzheimer or dementia patients that could be making a profound difference in their lifestyle changes and supplementation, so that if it does occur, it occurs way later.
Yeah.
You know, and there's some really interesting research that's just coming out.
It's an
really
amazing time. I know. Can't wait.
There's a lot of information on the website, foodforthebrain.org.
Good to know.
It's useful.
Look it up.
Is it hereditary? That's a big question everybody asks.
We're finding more components to the fact that there is some heredity going into there, but if I'm not mistaken, and I need to double check on this, but the last that I heard it was like 8%. So it's not a huge component, but there is a component.
I just know that my aunt's mother and sister had it, and then the aunt had it, and then someplace else, there's a friend that just got diagnosed, and her mother had it. So just in my little world, it just seems like there's a lot of.
It is amazing, and I'm not sure in Ventura, because that's where I do a lot of my work, is mostly in Ventura County. And I found out a couple of years ago that Alzheimer's is the 3rd leading cause of death in Ventura County. Now, that's not counting any of the other dementias. So if you put that together, to me, that's huge. And then in California, it moved up. It was the 6th leading cause of death. It is now the 5th leading cause of death. And in the United States, it is the 6th leading cause of death. So it is definitely, unfortunately, growing. So we do need to get some more handles on it and understanding it better. Part of what you were talking about with lifestyle is that we do know that if you've had a lot of head trauma, and that is where my mother fell into it because she had a lot of head trauma, you're more susceptible to dementia. So understanding that can also help, you know, and that's why doing that baseline with your doctor through the year, you know, that kind of helps. You know, you get an understanding of how things are going as you're moving along with it. So it's a matter of starting to tell your loved ones, okay, what can we do? What do we need, you know, exercising. Using the brain, that is so important, to exercise the brain. Now, what does that mean? That means doing something different. It's not doing, if you've done the crossword puzzles your whole life, that's not gonna work. It's learning a new language. It's picking up a musical instrument that you've never done before. It's taking dance lessons and you've never danced in your whole life. Challenging your brain. I mean, I can see the difference of when I took this job, how that first year, how my brain, it definitely made inroads because I was having memory issues, and granted I was going through menopause at the time, but it definitely made a difference because I was having to learn new channels of working, because I went from one industry to a very different industry. I was in retail. I was managing an interior design shop in Montecito. And all of a sudden, I am back then I was the educator and program manager. So, doing something very different. Luciana.
Can you tell us a little bit about the programs that Alzheimer's Association had in Santa Barbara?
In Santa Barbara, absolutely, we do, thank you. We do have an office here in Santa Barbara. Right now, it will be open periodically because we lost some staff. But we do have an office here. We have support groups that are here in Santa Barbara in person. We also have virtual support groups. We have education classes that we present. As you see, what I'm doing today is one of the things that we offer, and we do it in a lot of different ways. We've gone to health fairs where we have our table there and we have information. We do the walk every year to help support those programs and to keep all of that going. But we also do one-on-one consultations so that if you need to have more privacy and you want to learn a little bit more, we can do that one-on-one. We also have an 800 number that is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so that if something happens in the middle of the night or on a weekend or a holiday, you can always call the 800 number and there'll be someone there to kind of walk you through as, okay, well, you know what, this is just normal. You're going into a different stage and they're just kind of acting out, but this is what you can do, how to redirect. Because a lot of it is redirecting. You know, when they're talking about seeing ants on the wall, you know, you don't say, I don't see any ants on the wall, what are you talking about? Instead, you say, you know what, let me go get the fly swatter, or let me go get the Raid, and I will go get them, and we'll take care of the ants for you.
I'd love to add in an experience that I shared about 7 years ago. We were driving up to Slough for my niece's wedding, and we had my mother-in-law in the car with us. And at least 3 or 4 times she'd say, where are we going? And we had all of our kids, we have 3 sons, they were all in the car. And they started getting upset about the second time. I said, Alex is getting married. She goes, oh, she is. And every time she'd get excited, I said, yeah. Oh, but I don't have anything to wear. Oh, Mary, we have your outfit in the back. And the boys, you know, my children's look on their face was sad. And I said, look at how excited Nani is. It's the 3rd time. She's so happy. So let's all celebrate in that. And when you help change the mindset of your family members, like you were speaking of, because my sister-in-law used to get really upset. Mom, I just told you. And it's like, no. You know, it's like the ants on the wall. You celebrate over and over, and you just make it special. And then, so I totally agree with that, but it's been a journey.
Well, because you want their time to be good. You
Yes.
don't want them to be stressed out.
Yeah.
One of the hard things to do, especially when it's a parent, is having to step up against your parents. You know, and say, no, I'm sorry, Mom, you can't do that, or, you know, whatever. And they say, well, I'm your mother, and you can't do that. Well, Mom is acting like a 6-year-old, and yeah, I can. But that's what we have to do, because we need to make their quality of life worthwhile. You know, we need to be able to go in that. It's scary. You know, I mean, someone told me a couple of weeks ago that someone with dementia had talked about the fact that their brain never stops, that there's a buzzing sound that goes in and never stops. You know, and that's why as time moves on, they need to be in a much more quiet, much more intrusive, which is hard for family members, right? Because we want to spend time with them, we want to be with them, but they need less time with humans, and that's difficult, and not always easy, because I remember visiting my mom with my 2 youngest brothers, their wives, and my dad. So there were 6 of us in my mom's room, and when we left, and we weren't even there an hour, and we left, and I remember turning around to blow her a kiss, and she was sitting in her chair doing this. I was not too happy about that, because I had driven clear down from Santa Barbara to Woodland Hills to see her, but then it's like, oh no, wait a minute, it was too much. It was too many people, it was too much, even that hour was too much. And so we broke it up and only would go in 2 at a time, and we wouldn't stay for very long, you know, and it was hard, but it's what she needed. And it's really about them and understanding and getting it. That's why getting as much education as you can on what you're up against is very important.
I want to tell you a happy story. I have a very dear friend who just turned 105, and she's sharp as a tack. She worked for the United States Forest Service for over 40 years. When she retired from that, she worked at Cottage Hospital as a volunteer for 42 years. When she turned 100, she said, that's it, I'm done. And she's in an assisted living place right now, but she's still amazing. And I think that was the secret, that she just kept busy her whole life. So,
Yep.
keep busy,
And
girls.
tell me she still drinks and smokes.
No. She ever smoked, but I know she did drink, but not anymore.
Well, back in the day, everybody did, right? They had the cocktails.
Yeah.
But you know, and that's true, because not everybody who's aging has it. My father just passed away in January. He was 95 and a half. But what was interesting is that he kept saying in the last 2 months, he said, I don't know what's happening with my brain. I don't know what's happening. So he had decided to donate his body to UCLA. So I asked his wife a couple of months afterwards, I said, did you get the results back? And she goes, yeah. And I said, okay, well, what did Dad, die of? And she said COPD and a bad heart. And I said, any signs of dementia? Because he had been talking about it. She goes, none. He had none. And I thought, okay, well, the last 2 months of his brain not working was his body beginning to shut down. And at 95 and a half, I mean, it's just like, I remember him saying, I don't understand why it's not working. And I'm looking at him like, seriously, Dad? You're 95 and a half. And he didn't want to make it to 100. So he got his wish. But, not everybody does. But having that understanding, knowing what the 10 signs are so that you can tell the difference, that helps. That can relieve some of the stress because, we all get nervous about the fact that, are we getting it? Did we get it from our family? This kind of stuff. And it's like, not everybody goes down that road. So the more information you know, the more education you do, the better you're gonna be. Okay?
You mentioned the 7 stages, so people don't always go through all the 7 stages, I assume. They die before, or do
Sometimes.
the different types of dementia have different stages? Because I always heard that Alzheimer's is more like you get violent, or maybe that's the other Lewy body or something.
Lewy body.
That if you have vascular, you tend not to get violent, because I know some of the relatives have had problems with violence with their loved ones. right?
Exactly, and therefore, here's the saying, if you know one person with Alzheimer's, you know one person with Alzheimer's. Everybody's different. Their biological makeup is different, so they're gonna react different. And if they have multiple dementias, they're gonna have different symptoms. So one of the things that happens too is that if something happens in the interim, and that's why I'm talking about that plan, right? Because if somebody with dementia has a fall, has surgery, loses somebody that they love, any kind of shock can jumpstart the dementia into the next stage. So where you think you might have some time, all of a sudden something's changed because they've had a shock, they've had surgery, whatever. So understanding all of that helps to kind of know what you're up against. Okay, I think we need to, they
Well,
wanna.
it's time to wrap it up. We will be at Cody's if you have more questions. Jordana is gonna come and join us there too, so you may come and ask more questions if you'd like. That was just, I'm overwhelmed.
Amazing. Let's hear it for Jordana.
What a great topic and what great information you have. I'm just impressed.
Yeah, and that one comment about the Lewy body, my father-in-law had that, and he was always so sweet, but he was a little aggressive with the caretakers when he was at the senior community where he ended up. But, and he pretty much lost all memory, and he was a machinist, so he would sit, when I'd go visit him, he'd always just be working with his hands. But, and it got to the point where he didn't know who we were, but I'd walk in and I'd always wear a pretty dress, and I went at least 3 times a week, and his eyes would flicker, so I knew somewhere in there he knew that I was there, but, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I remember my father, and Karen might remember this, he would go sit out somewhere, and a lady next door would go into his bedroom and look at his clothes and try them on. Oh, he would get so upset, he'd get angry. And those are things that they had to try to control, and at that time he was in assisted living and they had to move him over to Alzheimer's, but people ruffling through his clothes was not a good thing. And he was very unhappy.
I have one more question. You mentioned that you have an office here. Is there an address to the office?
It's 1529 Chapala.
Oh, thank you.
And we have a raffle that we do each time, and we're gonna let Jordana pick who is going to be the winner this time.
Dolores.
You're the winner. There's a gift basket on the way out, you'll be picking that up.
And does anybody have a birthday this month?
When's mine?
Oh, Dolly, when is your birthday? The 28th of June.
Oh, we
So,
have another birthday.
oh, when is your birthday?
16.
Oh, the
Yay.
16th?
Oh,
Alma Rose?
22nd.
Okay, so the 16th is closest, but I think all June birthdays should should take home the flowers on the table. Whoever is closest to June 16th, please take the flower with you as well. Those are from Nursery. And I do have a couple more little announcements. As Nancy mentioned, we're gonna do the Alzheimer's walk in, I believe it's October. Is that correct?
No, I think it's November.
November, okay, even better, then we have more time. So we'll send information. It's a really beautiful event, thank you. And the walk is actually not that long. Yeah, we go from SBCC down through the harbor and then just end back. But it's so fun to raise money for,
And
all
you
the
don't have
research
to
and.
walk, you can just donate money for it. We'll send you the information on that one
Yeah.
when we get closer.
And dance was mentioned. I wanted to let you all know, there's a flyer in the back. I volunteer my time at Grace Fisher Foundation, and we're gonna be in the Solstice Parade. I do have an 82-year-old gal dancing with us. So if any of you are interested in being in the parade or just coming to dance class, it's all, free at the clubhouse, which is at Lacombe Plaza. But feel free to get one of these flyers. And then we also have a buddy walk coming up with the Down Syndrome Association in 2 weeks, and that's a fun festival at Chase Palm Park. So there's information out there if you would like it. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, ladies.
My great grandmother lived 1 month shy of 102, and I'm just as ornery as she was, so I got a good chance. Damn right. Why not? As long as I'm still healthy, Yeah. Right. That's right. Yeah. One day at a time. I tell people we don't know when it's our turn, so we got to take each day and live it to the fullest. Amen. I used to tell people there's this one young man that rides his bike on Sundays, right, on the bike path near us, and we'll say hi to him and how you doing. And I did find out that his son died several years ago, and he planted a tree in Evergreen Park for him. And I had to really bite my tongue and say, I can't say that anymore. And he'll say, how you doing? I'm still above the ground. I can't say that anymore.